So we are recording this so that we can play it back later. So with that said, I think it'd be a good idea to give everybody here a big round of applause. Thank you for coming in. Make it sound like a nice big crowd, nice big crowd. Yeah, that's how we do it. Oh, how many of you are EV owners? None? No? Okay, well then you guys are in the right place. So EV myths debunked, there's a lot of them. First, real quick on who I am. I'm Brian. I'm the host of a channel called Futuraza. I do mostly analysis. I do a lot of spreadsheets. I do a lot of projection and prediction. And then I spend a fair amount of time on other channels. You may see me on places like Tesla Fix, the Out of Spec podcast with Kyle Connor, Brighter with Herbert, on best-selling author Randy Kirk's channel, on the Tesla Life Show, on a whole bunch of places. You may have seen me at events. I've been at the Fully Charged live show in 3 different countries. I've been to Owners Club events in Michigan and Florida and Texas and California, Washington and Oregon, of course. And I'm about to go to Austria in a couple weeks for a big event out there, then back to Michigan, then back to California. It's what I do. I also go to things like the Battery Show, the North America Battery Show, where I get to meet 1 million people who are not interested in going on camera, but have insights that they will share. And I can ask tough questions and get real answers from actual engineers. And then I get to put them in my little Rolodex and call on them when I've got tough questions. I go to the car shows, I go to all the shows. I come here. I volunteer with the Oregon Electric Vehicle Association. So the myths debunked. I'm sure you've heard a few. Let's start with the biggest one I always hear. My gosh, they catch fire. Haven't you heard? Oh no, look at all these fires. I don't know if you've ever seen a car fire before, but cars are nouns, and nouns tend to catch on fire. That's a thing that happens to things. So this article from Motor Trend explains that gas and diesel are more likely to catch fire than EVs. And it makes sense if you think about it, but EV batteries have this famous reputation for being a little bit flamey. And part of the reason is you only see the news because it's so rare that it makes the news. If it was a Tesla or a Chevy Bolt, it'd be headline news. You've seen car fires on the way home from work that didn't make the news. Why would they? And the reason it's so common is because it's 29 times more likely for a gas car to catch on fire. So the ranking is EV fires, gas-powered car fires, hybrid fires. Oh, you've got both of them. Okay, twice as many points of failure. But I looked it up and I think I found the answer. Turns out gasoline's flammable. And I should have known combustion is right in the name. It's supposed to be internal. Sometimes it gets out. That's not ideal, but it happens. Another myth I've heard is they're too heavy. I saw a story a while back in England where there was a car fire in a garage, and between the weight of these EVs and the fact that they're always burning, it made the garage collapse. That's not part of it. That's not a thing. There are EVs that are heavy. There are EVs that are not heavy. So EVs tear up New Jersey roads. They should pay their fair share to fix them, says this opinion. And as you know, everyone's got one. EVs could damage roads way more than internal combustion engines due to their weight. Now let's look at something like the Model 3. This was for a long time the best-selling EV in the world. Now it's the second best-selling. 3,800 to 4,000 pounds. That is comparable to like a BMW 3 Series. It's got the same kind of performance, the same kind of extra features. And what's that weigh? Turns out it weighs about the same. In fact, a little less. Same thing with the Model S. That's a heavy car. But it's comparable to a full-size premium sedan like a Mercedes. Well, that's even heavier. The S-Class. And we see the same thing. The Model Y compared to like a BMW X3, it's the same. And then why aren't we focusing on other cars that are heavy? Do you ever see someone in a Chevy Suburban and somebody comes to them and says, "You're tearing up my roads"? I've never heard that. Only concern all of a sudden because it's an EV. And a Challenger weighs 4,400 pounds. I did not realize that. That's a lot. Now, there is some truth to it. There are some EVs that weigh a little bit. That's too much. But it is a brute force solution to a problem. The problem being, I want more range. And the brute force solution is put in a battery that weighs more than a Honda Civic. And you can look it up. The battery does weigh more than a Honda Civic. It is a solution. It's just not very elegant. So are they heavier? Well, some can be, but as a rule, not necessarily. There are companies that will take their gas car and just take out the internal combustion drivetrain, replace it with electric. That one's going to be heavier. Their electric is going to be heavier than their gas because they didn't build a purpose-built car. They built a do-everything car, and no car can do everything. Have you heard this one? They use slave labor to get the minerals, and they use conflict minerals. You know, cobalt, there's artisanal mines with families digging through the dirt and gathering baskets of ore. That's terrible. And it is, in a way, a real thing. It is overlooking a lot of other problems, namely that one of the biggest consumers of cobalt in the world is used in oil refinement. Gas refineries also use cobalt. They leave that part out. But the bigger thing is, there is a lot of research being done to reduce the amount of cobalt in batteries. And you know what's a good way to reduce it is to get rid of it entirely. Lithium iron phosphate batteries. This is the new hotness. There was a patent that kept them out of the US for a long time. They were big in China. They're starting to get big in the US over the last year. They have a little bit less energy density, but they use no cobalt, no manganese, no nickel. It's lithium, iron, and phosphate. Three things that are readily available in kind of every country. And then, of course, with the environmental problem, what about all the waste? You know, if you're doing all this mining, for what? Sure, we dig up oil and we burn it and then it's gone forever, or at least kind of. It's not in my yard anymore, isn't it? But there is recycling, and recycling is already starting to get big. Battery recycling shatters the myth of e-vehicle waste. It's a closed loop. Batteries were expected to start being recycled in big numbers 5-10 years ago, but there was a problem. They didn't die. You can't recycle them until they die. When the leaf would get down to, you know, if a leaf was wrecked, they wouldn't throw the battery out. They'd put it in an antique car. When that battery wore down too much, they wouldn't throw it out. They'd put it in a cabin for stationary storage because it's still got another 10 years on it. They didn't have enough stuff to recycle, and now they're getting it. And you've got companies like Redwood Materials, just outside of Reno, who has found a way to, in financially viable ways, to turn waste back into the products. It is easier to mine a finished product than to just refine dirt. And it's cheaper and it's easier. And there could be a day when the number of cars out there is going down and we're saying, we have enough batteries without mining. The grid's gonna collapse, you guys. I don't know if you've heard the grid is gonna collapse. It's too much energy. Well, I actually found some new research that I hadn't thought of when I was looking this up this week. Can they handle the grid? Can the grid handle it? Yes. Question that frequently comes up is, can the grid handle it? Getting the answer takes work through a number of key questions. If we divide how much power we need by the power we have, we find that to convert every car to electric, we would only need to increase US production by 22%. That sounds like a lot, but we're not doing it overnight. It would be a transition of 10, 15 years. And you can see that by 2030, a lot of the car companies that are the biggest today don't have very serious plans by then. And if we look at just new power generation over the next year, it's going to be increasing by 62.8 gigawatts. We only need 950 kilowatts, 950 billion kilowatts, and we're adding 62 gigawatts. It's a huge chunk in 1 year. It's right on pace for the 10-year thing. But what I found was, it'll be up here in a minute, EVs will bring unprecedented power demand, but their flexibility improves grid stability. So did you notice on Thanksgiving, they never send out a notice, you guys? Everybody's gonna be turning on their ovens at 4 p.m. If you do it, the power's gonna go out. Everyone does turn on their oven, and it doesn't kill the power supply. And it's because they know it's coming. We can predict with a bit of certainty what's gonna happen with the grid in a few days or a few weeks, and we can plan for it. California used to have a reputation for brownouts and blackouts, and we thought it was because of a lack of power supply. It turned out it was more about profiteering. So last summer, when there was an expected shortfall, the governor of the emergency services went out and said, hey, if you got an electric car, could you do me a favor? Don't charge today between 3 and 6 p.m. Just charge before, if you have to, do what you got to do, but don't charge between 3 and 6. And everybody said, yeah, that's reasonable. I can do that. And there was no problem with the grid. Cars can charge overnight. And that's when the power consumption is already the lowest. So you've got time of use pricing. A lot of companies utilities will offer time of use where they'll say, overnight, the power is much cheaper. You can schedule your car to charge then, and it fixes it. But then you've got virtual power plants, which is already a thing. If you've got like a power wall at your home for battery backup, many places will let you sell that power back to the grid, and now it's coming for cars too. Ford Lightnings are already doing it in, I want to say maybe Tennessee. There's a pilot program, maybe it's in Texas, where you can have your Ford Lightning plugged in at home, and if they need the power back, they can buy it back from you for something like 5 to 10 times what you paid for the power. And it's cheaper than firing up a gas peaker plant. More cars are going to have that. It's going to stabilize the grid. But then I found this. Do you know how much electricity is consumed making gasoline at the refinery? Forget all the other steps, just at the refinery. It is 43,000 million kilowatt hours. How many times could you charge a car on that? And the answer to that is, that's how many kilowatt hours, 43 billion, 70 kilowatt hour average, that's 617 million fill-ups just from the electricity used to turn oil into gas. This is the part I just found this week. There are only 3 million EVs in the US. They could each charge 206 times a year from that juice. And if you were to count every car in the country, the 282 million, including the ones that are mostly never driven, that's still 2 charges a year for free by getting rid of gas. So if you're telling me the grid can't handle it, I'm curious where you got your information. And we know the answer. It's the fossil fuel lobby. They're making trillions of dollars, and they've got money to share things that are in their best interest. Another myth, they take hours to charge. Well, I've got one, and you know what? I can agree. Mine has taken hours to charge because there's level 1, 2, and 3 charging. So level 1 is trickle charging. It's that outlet right there. For the first 6 months I had my Tesla, that's how I charged. And you plug it in and you get about 5 miles per hour. It's real slow. But I rarely drive more than 100 miles in a day, and I rarely drive more than 300 over the course of 2 days. So for my needs, it worked. I never needed to charge in town. I could always catch up. And if I'm going out on the road, it doesn't matter what my speed is at home. And then you've got level 2 charging, which is what I finally got put in last week, which is magical. It's basically a dryer plug. Think of it that way. It's your 220. You plug it in, now you're getting 50 miles an hour. Now, if you were on the road, that would be too slow. But I'm not. When I come home, if I'm on absolute empty and I plug it in, I wake up in the morning, it's as full as I want it to be. Those are great for, it depends what you need it for. If I'm going to a movie, this is what I want to charge with. I don't want this, it's too fast. I'm not coming out halfway through the credits or through the previews to unplug. I want something slower. And then you get to the fast chargers, which can go pretty darn fast as you need them to, but you're still talking 10 to 15 minutes. So to charge from 20 to 80%, most people don't run down past 20. Most of the time you won't charge over 80 because it starts slowing down at that point. It depends where you are. It could be 20 minutes, it could be 8 hours. But you'll know before you get there, because most cars, if your car doesn't have a system that tells you how fast the charger you're going to is, you can get an app on your phone that'll tell you. So I only go to the farthest one I can reach that is the fastest. And I'll roll in at 8%, I'll plug it in, and unlike a gas car, where you're just gonna stand there for 5 minutes, because it's safety, you just plug it in and you walk away. You go to the bathroom, you grab your snacks. This guy, and he's here somewhere back in the corner, they've done road trips with me. But you can't road trip, you can't. Well, they'll tell you they can. An EV really is, unless you built it yourself, and there's some beautiful ones out there, an EV is a computer on wheels. Now, all cars are a computer on wheels. Some of them just don't like to admit it. Some of them want you to think you're still in control in ways you aren't. So what you get is, you put in your destination, put in San Diego, and it'll tell you, here's your charging stops. Pick which one you want. And just do the math. Trust me, it's better this way. So the math is, you got that, the 5 minutes, the first 5 minutes you can't count because you were going to be there anyway, holding the handle. The next 10 minutes you stretch your legs. If you got pets, they want to get out. If you got screaming kids and you really just want to get to Disneyland, trust me, they want to stretch their legs more than you do. And when you do get to your destination after a 12-hour day, you don't feel like you've been run over by a train. You've got rest, you've got your legs stretched. And it does just work. You leave the house full, you're gonna go 3-4 hours before you need to charge. You're gonna charge for 20 minutes, gets you another 200, 250 miles of range. By the time you get to that, if you need another 15-minute break to charge, you can, but you've been driving at this point for 5, 6, 7 hours. You're probably there. EVs are too expensive. It's a rich man's toy, haven't you heard? And for a long time that was true. All the serious early EVs were very expensive. The Model S, the Model X, those were expensive. When the Model 3 came out, that was pretty expensive. The Chevy Bolt was not a very good car, and if you didn't get incentives, if you didn't get crazy tax credits or weird leases, it was an expensive car. The Leaf was $35,000. That's not a good price for what it was. But here's the new car prices as of this month. The average new car, $47,000. $47,000. It came up during the pandemic, and it really hasn't come back down. And a lot of manufacturers got addicted to that high price, just like we see with potato chips and soft drinks. Those shouldn't be as much as they are, but they know we'll pay it. And if you look at some cars, Hyundai Ioniq 5, $43,000. That's less than the average. And if you lease it, you can get the federal incentive. And if you buy it, many states will have an incentive. Kia EV6, $43,000. Mustang Mach-E, $42,000. That's a real car you can go get today. They're in stock. Model 3, base price of $40,000. And again, some of these have state incentives, some of them have federal, some of them have both or neither. But we're just looking at the unsubsidized price. Now here's a neat one. Matthew Donegan Ryan caught this. This loaded Model Y is $23,500 after point of sale rebates in Washington State. This one, here's the math. Now, are you going to get that $9,000 credit? Probably not. There's not very many of them, and it's unclear who's going to get it, and it's going to run out quick. But somebody is going to buy this car for this price. If you're telling me that that's too expensive, and then you're going to save 5, 10 grand on not buying gas over the first 10 years of ownership, it's no longer a rich man's toy. Now, this is one I've heard lately. The depreciation is going to kill you. It's going to kill you. But what it ignores is, because Tesla doesn't have dealerships, when they want to mark up the price, they mark up the price. During the pandemic, MSRPs stayed low on your Toyota or Jaguar, whatever, but the actual price you paid was higher. And the way you can measure that, and I tried to find a bunch of different ways, is no math this time. It's just Americans are increasingly upside down on auto loans as used car values fall. It doesn't matter what the brand is. The number of buyers who are trying to move up to a new car or who are finding themselves underwater is at a new high, something like 22%. It's not Teslas, it's not VWs, it's not Fords that are depreciating like crazy. All new cars go through this. Go look at a 10-year-old Mercedes S-Class, and the price will be so low you'd consider buying one until you realize what any of the parts on it cost to replace. And a lot of them are due. Used car prices are starting to edge down after soaring for years, and while the trend is much welcome, it's also causing trouble for consumers who purchase their vehicles at higher prices. So haven't you heard, this is a big one, EVs don't last. They break down, they're going to die. The batteries definitely don't last. Do I want to buy a car that's going to need a new battery in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? Well, no, but fortunately that's not a thing. And it's literally not a thing because by law, the minimum warranty is 8-year, 100,000 mile. You're not going to find a lot of cars that will give you an 8-year, 100,000 mile warranty on the powertrain. It's very rare. It happens. I think Kia might be doing it right now for a limited time. Somebody is. But you know when you buy an internal combustion engine car that has a 60,000 mile warranty, you know that engine's good for 60. You know it's good for 100. And they know it too. Because if they thought it was good for 61, half of them would fail at 59 and they'd go broke. So the warranties are very long. Here's a bunch of those old Leafs. I searched only 2011 through 2013 Leafs, found 171 results nationwide. They didn't make very many of these cars, and 171 of them are for sale, still running. So they last. BMW, 4-year, what do we got? 4-year, 50,000 mile. Buick, 3-year, 36,000 mile with powertrain up to 60,000. Chevy, 60,000 mile. They're not going to die at 60. They're probably not going to die at 90 or 100. And the same is true of your batteries. Bumper to bumper, typically 3-year 36 and 5-year 60 for the powertrain. And some up to 10-year 100,000. So then you hear, well, okay, but once my warranty's done, then what? It's out of warranty, there's no shops to fix it, and it's going to be too expensive. I don't know if you've ever had repairs done, big repairs on an older car, but they're expensive. EV replacement, battery, anywhere from $6,500 to $20,000, depending on the brand. Some cars make the battery in a place that's really hard to get to. The Fiat comes to mind where it's embedded in this like capsule that's within the car. Some are easier. There are cars with structural battery packs that can just be unbolted and replaced in an easy 104-step process, I think the manual said. It is an easy process. It's very quick. Changing out a motor on a car is days. Changing out a battery on an EV is hours. But I went ahead and said, what's the most popular, seller in the US? It's the F-150. Good rule of thumb, 7 to 9 grand if your motor blows. I guess it's not unreasonable. You've got kind of a new truck at that point. but it is a lot of money, and it's comparable to the battery. It's the drivetrain. So BMW, 10 to 30,000. And I haven't had experience replacing entire motors, but I have had things like head gaskets changed, and that was thousands in my old van. Okay, it's a van, that makes it a little harder, but still. A lot of times, when a vehicle gets past 150,000, anything that goes wrong mechanically, you just throw your arms up and say, we had a good run. Because there's not a lot of residual value in the vehicle. But who fixes them? Well, this is just in the Portland area. Specialty Auto Care fixes them. Portland Automotive, Hawthorne, EV Rides, Konkin, Green Tech, and QC Charge, who has a booth outside. This is just in Portland. The reason we didn't see a lot of shops was because for a long time, the majority of every EV ever made was still under warranty. You can't compete with that. That's free. So it made it hard for shops to get a foothold. EVs will collapse without subsidies. Now, most of these topics we're talking about are big enough that I could have done the whole presentation about any one of them. And this is not the exception, this is the rule. We could go on about this for days. An important thing to realize is fossil fuels last year got $7 trillion globally in subsidies. That is, I mean, if we're not going to give EVs $7,500, this has got to go. Because that's crazy. They make $100 billion a day and they're getting $7 trillion in subsidies. And then this one's a recent one that I love. It keeps coming back. They're not good for the environment. Well, they are. It's been debunked 1,000 times with scientific studies. You have to get really abusive with your math to find it any other way. Yes, electric cars are greener, even when the power comes from coal. If you use coal to generate power and put it into your EV, it still results in less emissions than just burning gas. Because at a power plants are very efficient. It's easy to make a big plant efficient. But a little power plant, like the one in your car, it's very hard to make it efficient. And 80% of the gas that goes into your car is turned into waste heat. Unless you like it real hot inside, and then it's just heat. So, Q&A time, only 2 rules. Short, 1 to 2 sentences, and it has to end with a question mark. Because sometimes you get, sometimes you end up with, sermons. Any questions? Thank you guys for coming in. Yeah. Gentleman in the back.
So I understand too, you were talking about fire at the very beginning, that if there is a fire on those, it's practically impossible to put out.
Sure. So what he said is that if there is a fire, how on earth do you put it out? Because they burn hotter, they burn a lot more intense, they have a greater duration of burn. I've seen stories where a fire department will show up and put 36,000 gallons on it, and it's still having trouble going out. And the answer to that is it's the wrong tool for the job. That department didn't know how to put out an EV fire. If you have a grease fire in your kitchen, how many gallons of water would you like to pour on it? Okay, so there are 2 big ways to do EV fires. One is the chemical spray, which takes a minute. And the second is a big heavy blanket that they just drag over it and it smothers it. And both of those work really well. And there's a company now that has raised funds to go out and train fire departments nationwide on these techniques and how to understand it. And every manufacturer has a material data safety sheet that has all the information on where the cutoffs are, where not to do things. So it is when they do ignite, they can burn quite aggressively, but it is something that's understood. Fun little story on Teslas, at least. The battery pack is designed, it's batteries and metal, right? This metal is steel, this metal is aluminum, so that if a fire does occur, they drop out. And it's when you look at it, you're like, that's so simple, so elegant. I don't know why I didn't think of it. I mean, no one asked me, but thank you for that. Yes, sir.
So you say just smothering it will kill the battery fires?
That's what the fire departments do, is they've got this big, heavy blanket that just smothers it. Gentleman in the back.
How does car insurance compare for EV versus?
Yeah, how much is car insurance? So it varies by state, but generally speaking, if you shop around, your price should be about comparable. I am not an exciting driver. I think my insurance is $130 a month on a brand new Model Y. Full coverage, whatever the bank and the state require. So I've seen studies that have looked at comparable cars. If you're coming from a 86 Corolla to a brand new anything, it's going to be more. My insurance is definitely more than it was on my 2016 Nissan Quest, but if you total a Nissan Quest, it's like $10,000. So if you compare it to cars of similar value, the insurance rates in most states will be about the same, and in terms of repair costs will also be the same. You might have a little harder time getting parts on something that's brand new on the market, but insurance doesn't, I guess, factor that part in as much. They are safer cars too, which has to help.
You covered the total electric supply, but what about the ability to get it from source to the customer?
A fantastic question. So Brian, you're saying we've got enough power, but do we have enough power here? The interconnect famously is overdue for a bit of a refresh. And the answer to that is more and more power is being generated locally. Rooftop solar, wind that's just on the other side of the mountains instead of 2 states over. The closer you can get power to home, the less grid you need. So on those, the grid has a lot of catching up to do. And I saw a documentary on it a while back. I say documentary, it was on YouTube, does that count? Explaining some of the obstacles to why the grid is so painful to update, and it's all land rights use and right of way and all that. But by decentralizing the power plants, it gives you an opportunity to generate locally where you actually need it.
If a friend posts a picture on Facebook showing a charging station powered by diesel engines, how do you answer that?
So that's a good one. That is was that Kettleman City, I think. That was a Tesla charger. And on that one, it's been debunked. That particular one, the owners of the property, a reporter went out to the site and went to the owner and said, "Can you tell me about that diesel thing?" And he said, "I can't believe it took this long for someone to actually show up," because none of these stories covered that. It was a viral image. That's not part of the charger thing. That's a separate thing for like the gas station next door or something. It's not connected. So yeah, it wouldn't make sense. When there are times when on busy holiday weekends, you would need more capacity at certain locations than the grid can provide. What Tesla would do in those cases is bring out a flatbed with giant mega pack batteries on it. Each one during the day, during peak hours, can charge like 100 cars before it's depleted. So you would just ask them why. Why would they use the most expensive form of power and then sell it for 25 cents a kilowatt? It doesn't make sense. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Are we about to see a wave of Chinese EVs coming? And if so, what's that going to do to the local market?
So, are Chinese EVs coming? Globally, the answer appears to be yes, but it's taken a long time. In China, they're doing very well, of course. There are over 300 brands of Chinese car, 100 of them considered serious. But in Europe, they're struggling to get a foothold. BYD has a market share of 1.1%. And it's because by the time you export them and make them pay all the export fees and shipping and all that, and build them to the spec that Western buyers want, they're no longer cheaper. Because these factories that build your car, my car, their car, it's still robots. And robots get paid the same wage globally. So Are they coming? The answer is still yes, but maybe not to the US because we have a 28% import tax on Chinese-made automobiles. And that's why we only see Volvo and Polestar out of China. And it's because they're under the Volvo brand, who exports a bunch of industrial equipment, and they get a tax wash. So what I expect to see is the Chinese brands building factories in Mexico, which will qualify as North American made. They would get the IRA credits, and that's what to watch for, but you'll get about a 2 to 3 year notice that that's gonna happen. That's a great question. Any other myths? Any other deeply personal questions? Okay, good. Okay, well, I want to thank you guys for coming out. I will be doing another presentation, probably less exhausting than this one, in another 20 minutes. I do have some goodies to give away. Do you have the bag? Because I love toys, and I love buying toys, but I don't like playing with toys, and I don't like having toys. So if you need a car, for example, a Tesla Roadster, Anybody excited? Come up and see me afterwards. Thank you, guys.